Hi everybody and welcome to another episode of Nakatomi Test Kitchen. I am your host, Kelly Nakatomi. I realized that the past few episodes we've been kind of deviating away from my favorite kind of food, which is Japanese, and kind of wandering over into like breads and things like that. So today I wanted to kind of bring that right back and kind of touch on Japanese food that's not sushi or tempura. When you ask most people here in the States, what's Japanese food? Their first inclination is to go sushi or tempura. One of the easiest ways to try new and interesting Japanese cuisines is to go to your local Izakaya. If you're in a larger city, they're becoming super popular, so you see more of those pop up. In smaller towns, maybe not so much. But Japanese pubs, also known as Izakaya, is an amazing place to try small plates, kind of like tapas, and see if you like certain flavors, right? These plates are small, they're fairly affordable, and if you don't like it, then you're probably out just a few bucks. But I don't know, I haven't found a dish in the izakaya that I'm not fond of yet, so let's go ahead and get started with today's dish, which is Nasu no nikomi, or Nasu no miso itame, which is eggplant cooked in sweet miso. It can either be Nasu no miso itame, which is eggplant nasu, which is fried in miso, or it can be nasu no miso nikomi, which is nikomi is stewed. So it's still prepared in a frying pan. It just kind of depends on who you're talking to, but it ends up usually kind of being the same dish. So I'm going to actually, I know I've said this when I did the vegan eggplant dish, that I kind of want to start using American eggplants because those are more readily available here. Not everybody has an Asian market. If you do have an Asian market or a market that actually sells Chinese or Japanese eggplant, use that. If not, American eggplants, Western eggplants work just fine in this recipe. Japanese eggplants are smaller and thinner, so are Chinese eggplants. I think you see that if you go back and see my vegan eggplant unagi bowl recipe. This is beefier. So in the Japanese traditional recipe, it calls for 2 eggplants. In terms of using a Western eggplant, you're only going to use half of one large one, which then you're going to cut in half. So you have 2 quarters. And you're going to go ahead and cut these into bite-sized pieces. So eggplant shrinks when you cook it, so you want to actually make them a little bit larger than what you would consider bite-sized. And they do kind of soften up too. So and then, just to get rid of the bitterness and to prevent it from browning while you're making everything else, is you just want to put this into a bowl of water. Now it'll float, but don't worry about that. And go ahead and do the other one as well. The nice thing about this dish is it's meant to be, rustic home cuisine, so you don't necessarily have to have these in perfect slices or anything like that. In fact, you probably want to make these in more of a large pieces. Oops. While that is soaking, let's go ahead and make the sauce that we'll be using in the frying pan to go along with the eggplant. It's seriously like the easiest recipe, and it's so filling. First ingredient is miso. Now miso is super healthy for you. It is, if you're following like a macrobiotic diet, you probably have like a ton of miso in your fridge. I'm using a half tablespoon of red or regular miso and half a tablespoon of white miso. White miso is a little bit milder in flavor than red miso. if you're watching your salt intake, white miso tends to be what you kind of go for, or you can actually find reduced sodium miso at your local supermarket. To that, we're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar. Now, you can actually use a granulated sugar substitute if you'd like for this recipe, because you're not baking with it, you're not relying on the sugar to do anything except just sweeten the dish. And then you add part of our Japanese pantry staples. So you have a tablespoon of sake, a tablespoon of mirin, which is sweetened sake, which is separate from the sugar that you use in the recipe. The sugared kind of sweet cooking wine actually adds a little bit of thickness to the dish. So you don't want to like substitute one for the other. They're kind of like 2 separate things. And you're going to add 1 teaspoon of soy sauce. Now, miso is already pretty salty, so you don't really want to go too heavy on the soy sauce here. It really is just for flavor. And then, this is like my little twist on the traditional recipe. I add 2 teaspoons of grated ginger. In Japan, it comes in tubes. It's already grated, hands-free, mess-free. You can also, this brand SMB or House, depending on where you are, also makes grated wasabi, also makes grated garlic. Convenience is so good when you're actually cooking for one. So 2 teaspoons of grated ginger. If you don't have the tubes, you could always just grate your own ginger. Super, super easy. I also add a little bit of ajinomoto, which is granulated MSG. I know that that's a touchy subject here in the States. A lot of people will say, oh, I'm allergic to MSG, without realizing that MSG is actually in a lot of foods that you buy at the grocery store. Most processed foods, whether it's like potato chips or Doritos or anything like that, they usually have some level of MSG as a flavor enhancer. You can completely omit this if you think that you are sensitive to this. It's the same kind of umami flavor that you would get out of, like, say, mushrooms. They actually have very similar properties. So if you are somebody who's allergic to mushrooms, maybe stay away from MSG. But beyond that, I don't see why you should. So a couple sprinkles of that. Ends up being about a teaspoon of ajinomoto. Doesn't really change the flavor, but it kind of enhances the overall flavor of the finished dish. This you are going to combine and what you really want to just do is get the miso completely just kind of emulsified so it's not just a big old lump. If you cannot find anything other than just one kind of miso, you can just use your one kind of miso. That you don't necessarily have to use half of one kind and half of another. I'm somebody who keeps multiple kinds of miso in my fridge, so if you're somebody who can only find one kind of miso, you can just use that. It still makes the dish delicious. I just happen to have both kinds of miso in my fridge. And so having half of a heavier, more robust miso and then one that's lighter kind of makes a more of a medium, a medium miso sauce, which is something I like. You know, much like most Japanese foods, I guess most home-cooked meals anywhere. Everybody has their own little touches, kind of like me adding ginger to this. Okay, and that is our finished cooking liquid. Let me go ahead and put this away. When you are ready to cook your eggplant, you want to go ahead and make sure that the eggplant is dry, because you don't want to have water going to a frying pan full of hot oil, because it'll spatter and you don't want that. So go ahead and take your eggplant, pat it dry. Start up your kundo, and you want to have it at a medium heat. You're not trying to scorch or sear anything. And to that, you're going to add just a couple of tablespoons of vegetable oil, or your favorite neutral oil, whether it's grapeseed or avocado or canola or sunflower or whatever. Just don't use like an olive oil for this, because you don't really want that kind of olive flavor, the olive oil flavor in this dish. Once the oil has warmed up, you can go ahead and you're going to start by cooking with your eggplant skin side down, because that's the toughest side. And the white part of an eggplant will actually absorb the oil like right away. So you want to make sure that you're using the oil to cook your the skin part first. And you're going to let that cook just for a few minutes. And once you've gotten some of the heat transferred through the skin, you can go ahead and start turning the eggplant. Now some households will be like, use more oil so that the eggplant absorbs more oil, but I don't know. I think that makes for an oilier dish. It's not necessarily my favorite. And you'll notice as you cook it that you'll start seeing it start to cook through. Here's a good example of that, where, you know, half of it's cooked through, but the other half is still kind of white and opaque. So you want to just make sure that you cook this through until it's fairly translucent all the way around. And you can see already that it's absorbed all the oil that I put into the frying pan. So you don't want to go too heavy-handed with the oil here. I know a lot of kids are not necessarily fans of eggplant or vegetables in general. I was one of those kids that was like, eggplant. Ever since I was a kid, I liked eggplant parm. I liked Nasu no miso or miso ni. I also like miso on salmon, broiled. And it really is like a really healthy ingredient to use miso with your eggplant. Just makes for an all-round healthy, veggie-forward dish. And see, you can tell the eggplant has kind of shrunken down a little bit. Now you can take your heat down even lower, to a lower heat. And to that, it smells good already. You're going to add your miso cooking sauce. And then you're going to cook this through. Super easy, right? Now, if you want, you can add tofu, firm tofu chunks to this. You can add ground pork to this if you want. You can add, in some Japanese households, they'll add like little thin strips of deep fried tofu, like atsuage, to this to add a little bit extra protein. But to tell you the truth, miso has plenty of protein. It's a fermented soybean, so it's a soybean dish. My mouth is watering. And that's honestly it. Let me go ahead and put the frying pan away and get a little setup ready so I can have this for dinner. I'll be right back. And we're back. I've cleared everything away, made a nice bowl of steamed white rice and a bowl of miso soup. And we have our finished eggplant in sweet miso sauce. Nasu no miso煮, or nasu no miso itame. All you really have to do is to top this with some chopped green onions. You want to just use the green parts, not the white parts. And that adds a little bit of crunch to the dish and a little oniony flavor, which is always yummy. And then you also want to add a little toasted sesame seed, which you can actually buy it toasted, or you can just buy the untoasted and just toast it on a frying pan over low heat until it is fragrant. And that's dinner for me. At most izakayas, this would come just by itself, because most izakaya, like pubs in general, are places to have sake or beer. And so these are foods to have with the sake or beer, something salty, something sweet to just kind of pop in your mouth so you can actually drink more, I guess. In my case, when I go to an izakaya, I tend to have hot tea. Occasionally I will have a glass of beer though. Let me go ahead and do a taste test because I can't wait. This is one of my favorite dishes. So like I said, at most izakayas, this is served by itself. You can also order like a bowl of rice and some miso soup. Some izakayas offer it as an upgrade kind of combo or a set meal. Or you can just enjoy it by itself. The eggplant is sweet, it's salty. There's so much umami coming from like the soy sauce and the miso. Makes your mouth water just by eating it, which I guess is the intended effect. It's perfect with rice. One more. It's like, it's pub food, but it's still comfort food. It's Japanese home cooking. You would get this not just at an izakaya, but you also get it at home as well. My mom used to make this all the time because I'm an eggplant person. I love eggplant. So tasty. I love it so much. I am going to turn off the cameras, finish eating this for my dinner. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Nakatomi Test Kitchen. I am your host, Kelly Nakatomi, and I will see you next time.